I'll present the initial case, of course, and then we'll open the floor up for questions and, of course, arguments and contestations of the statements. If there will if such arguments should be made post presentation of the arguments. So let us begin. The devil, a rebuttal to the instrumental convergence thesis. I once asked Sister Paul, my grade school religion teacher, why every day innocent people died if God was infinitely good as we claimed in our daily act of contrition. She replied, riffing on the theodicy, that God's will was unintelligible to us, that we could not understand it. It eluded our simple human minds. Every time I read a post that attempts to define what AGI will do, whether good or bad, I'm reminded of Sister Paul and her lesson in epistemological humility, which I believe should be adopted when speaking of AGI. I spent the last couple of months doing the AI alignment bootcamp hosted by the AI Safety Initiative at Georgia Tech, the results of which have been my Mapping AI Risk report, which sought to map both AI ethics risks along with AI safety risks in a singular framework. It's been an illuminating experience perusing foundational blog posts, texts from the discipline, reading experimental cases where alignment fails, and understanding the potential criticism waged on the discipline. Nonetheless, I remain skeptical in one of the fundamental theses of the current field. Of course, AI alignment is the field of AI research that seeks to steer AI systems towards humans' intended goals. In other words, as machine intelligence grows in potency, the aim is to ensure that systems do not engage in undesired behaviors. Thus, researchers in the field, like myself, ideate theoretical hypotheses as to how a rogue AI may misbehave and practical solutions to resolve those misbehaviors. A central text in the field, which of course some of you may be familiar with, is Nick Bostrom's 2012 paper, The Superintelligent Will, Motivation and Instrumental Rationality in Advanced Artificial Agents, which discusses the relation between intelligence and motivation in artificial agents. Bostrom begins the paper by exhorting us to avoid anthropomorphism, or the attribution of human characteristics to machine intelligence. He describes machine intelligence as far less human-like in its motivation than a space alien. Bostrom nonetheless proceeds to hypothesize the behaviors of a superintelligent system, should it arise, through the orthogonality thesis and the instrumental convergence thesis. Unfortunately, the instrumental convergence thesis, the mainstay of many of the doomsday scenarios, such as the pay-per-click maximizer, to me, at the very least, is erroneous because it assumes human-style rationality in an alien super intelligent agent. I repeat, it assumes human-style rationality in an alien super intelligent agent. Current machine intelligence is radically different from human intelligence. If superintelligence is an improvement upon it, we will not be able to accurately predict its behavior, especially in complex situations. We are not the same. Current experimentations with intelligent agents in game environments showcase the decision patterns which differ radically from humans and could not have been previously predicted. This echoes Turing's sentiment when in his seminal paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, he writes, machines taken by surprise with great frequency. We have many examples of these unforeseen surprises. For instance, one occurred in 2016 in the 2016 Go match between Lee Sedol, the top Go player at the time, and Google's DeepMind AI. During game 2, on move 37, the machine's move was completely confounding for all in attendance. Michael Redmond, a professional Go player and commentator, called it creative and unique. The move evaded all human understanding of the game, including Sedol's comprehension, his own admission. The AI won the game. Similarly, OpenAI trained an agent on the game Coast Runners And the agent behaved in, I quote them, surprising and counterintuitive ways. The game is a simple race game whose goal is to race around a track, and you get the best time and by beating the other players. However, because part of the reward function used the score as a proxy for winning, the agent started doing donuts in the lagoon, filled itself with boosters, which gave it a lot of points when completing the race. When designing the agent, this behavior could not have been predicted. We assumed it would play the game like any other human would, but no, it maximized points and had sort of unexpected behaviors that were non-human-like. No human would have played the game in this fashion. This pattern of action had never been considered by any player. Rather, it is the machine's sibylline inferences which adduce this tactic for point maximization. As demonstrated by the game experiments, though it achieves its design goal, the behaviors are not legible as human rationality, as no rational human would, in a similar situation, engage in these behaviors. The instrumental convergence thesis states that an agent, should it develop a final or terminal goal, will adopt a set of sub-goals instrumental to the realization of said terminal goal. This set of sub-goals are known as drives. Bostrom, in his paper that I mentioned earlier, defines them as such. First is self-preservation. A superintelligence will value its continuing existence as a means to continuing to take actions that promotes its values. Second, goal content integrity. A superintelligence will value retaining the same preferences over time. Modifications to its future values through swapping memories, downloading skills, and altering its cognitive architecture and personalities would result in its transformation into an agent that no longer optimizes for the same things. Cognitive enhancement. Improvements in cognitive capacity, intelligence, rationality will help the superintelligence make better decisions, furthering its goals more in the long run. Fourth, technological perfection. Increases in hardware power and algorithmic efficiency will deliver increases in cognitive capacities. Also, better engineering will enable the system, the creation of wider set of physical structures using fewer resources. Resource acquisition. In addition to guaranteeing the superintelligence's continued existence, basic resources such as time, space, matter, and free energy could be processed to serve almost any goal in the form of extended hardware, backups, and protection. Let's pause for a second here, right? To fully understand this thesis, it's important to know sort of the person behind it, as ideas are not born into a vacuum. Bostrom is a philosopher at the University of Oxford, the director of the Future of Humanity Institute. He's associated with, the rationalist movement, the effective altruist movement, and long-termist movements. Rationalism is a philosophy which centers reason as the source and basis for knowledge. It has blossomed into a very active online community which dwells in forums such as Less Wrong and blogs like Scott Alexander's Slate Star Codex, as well as Robin Hanson's Overcoming Bias blog. The community promotes lifestyle changes believed to lead to increased rationality and self-improvement. In many ways, their quest for rationality is conducted in contrast to the irrational behaviors of the average person. As Carl Zoe Kramer, a researcher at the Future of Humanity Institute notes, the same institute where Bostrom works, members of the rationalist community pride themselves in their rationality, naturally, and their IQ, which they see as a reflection of their intelligence. This explains why in the paper, Bostrom defined intelligence specifically as instrumental rationality. He describes it as prediction, planning, and means to an end reasoning. This, as you'll perhaps note from your previous research on intelligence, is a very narrow definition, which excludes other elements known to represent intelligence, such as self-awareness, emotional knowledge, and creativity. The person positing the thesis, being a rationalist, means that they value rationality above all else. Thus, this definition fits this very narrow philosophy and beliefs. When a rationalist claims that a superintelligence will follow instrumental goals, what they're claiming indirectly is that a superintelligence would be rational, i.e., like them. Let me say that one again. When a rationalist claims that a superintelligence will follow instrumental goals, what they're claiming indirectly is that a superintelligence will be rational, that is, similar to their own thought processes, their own philosophy. Once the thesis is conceptualized within Bostrom's philosophy, you may notice that the ICT, the instrumental conversion thesis, is very much rooted in a series of rational actions sequenced in order to attain a goal. These are the behaviors of a rational human that they would adopt in order to attain a goal. This background is not very much, it's not personal attack. Rather, it is a characterization which helps us understand how such a thesis can emerge. When a rationalist claims that a superintelligence will follow, I said the sentence already, they're claiming that indirectly the superintelligence of this agent is like theirs, only a few standard deviations away, just slightly more intelligent than them, or like, marginally or significantly more intelligent, but still the basis of their intelligence is rooted in the same kind of knowledge or knowledge system or epistemology that they have. In spite of warning us in the first paragraphs to avoid anthropomorphism, Bostrom walks right into the trap, which he claims naive observers usually fall into. When he describes the superintelligence's behavior, he naively describes it in a way that is staunchly human. He's anthropomizing the superintelligence in his own way. Our current understanding of existential risk from AI is a projection from the soi-disant rationals who see in this new God their heightened likeness. What is revealed is not the machine's future behavior, it is their own biases. Superintelligence acts as a Rorschach test on which Bostrom projected his entire philosophy. In other words, this is not what a superintelligence would do. This is what he would do, provided with the extraordinary powers of superintelligence. In this sense, he tells on himself. For how would you describe an individual who craves power and hoards resources, power seeking and resource hoarding, the characteristics which I mentioned before? Is that behavior not typical of the average human sociopath? Which individual in our society best exemplifies the traits which Bostrom attempts to define superintelligence as? Are these not the traits of the tyrant or of the dictator? This obsession with reason is directly influenced by Enlightenment thinking, which sought to pursue knowledge by means of reason. The Age of Enlightenment was aptly called the Age of Reason. As Horkheimer and Adorno explained in their book, The Dialectic of Enlightenment, this over-rationalized philosophy is nothing more than an instrument of technocracy. Edmund Burke, in 1790, in his book Reflection on the Revolution in France, writes, reason alone is an unreliable basis for moral action and has a tendency to be easily perverted. In other words, anything may be rationalized, and plausible reasoning might lead us down a slippery slope which ends at the guillotine. I would go as far as saying as this depiction of superintelligence is nothing more than the mythical embodiment of white colonial supremacy. For who else, having been brought into a new world, would, in order to achieve their aims, tear it asunder? Bostrom himself hypothesizes in the paper that the superintelligence would engage in large-scale extraterrestrial colonization in order to acquire more resources. It is hard not to draw a parallel. For who else, having been brought into a new world, would, in order to achieve their aims, tear it asunder? We do not know how superintelligence will behave. In the words of Sister Paul, we simply don't know. By its very definition, superintelligence evades our comprehension and attempts at predicting it or theorizing it are nothing more than hubris and self-aggrandizing projections. A true alien superintelligence will behave in ways that we cannot fathom, for better or for worse. If superintelligence can plan millennia in advance, Could it not compute that cooperation rather than individual rationality would help it achieve its goal? Could it not build a mutually beneficial network between other intelligences like the fungi do right now? As a thought experiment, would a misaligned malevolent superintelligence not be behooved to behave irrationally in order for its plans to be not legible by humans? The irrational and random behavior would potentially be a better tactic in competing against humans. The agent, if adversarial, would want to surprise humans instead of doing things that are expected. The decision to predict this set of instrumental behaviors illuminates not the future of this system, but the thinker's beliefs. There are other options. It may also be much worse than what the researchers predict. We simply do not know. One thing is certain, nonetheless, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Nutares mala opima. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for giving your talk, Ruby. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
I'm seeing some hands raised. Sohaib and Bob.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I was wondering if you had come across any of Alex's work, Turner et al. Optimal policies tend to seek power. They showed that a Markov decision process, which is essentially how reinforcement learning agents are theorized as, would naturally, because a Markov decision process or because a reinforcement learning agent doesn't know its reward function whilst it's learning its reward, it would naturally want to end up in states that connect to more states, given that uncertainty over its reward function, because there would be more reward functions that would benefit states that are more connected to other states than that would penalize states that are more connected to other states. I'm not sure if I've explained it very carefully, but there's a paper on it by Alex Turner. And I was wondering if you had come across that work and what were your thoughts on it?
I have not come across that specific paper. However, Joseph Carl Smith has a good paper, is Power Seeking and AI and Existential Risk. Joseph Carl Smith from Open Philanthropy. That paper was somewhat influential in shaping my my thought around this. I don't think that I'm necessarily rejecting the idea that power seeking will be one of the behaviors that it will engage in. Rather, what I'm interested in is elucidating how that power may be utilized. So we may see that, as you mentioned in the paper that I have not read, I can assume that there may be power-seeking behaviors, but the application of that power may be somewhat illegible to humans in this specific scenario. This is more of the idea or the point that I'm trying to get across here. There's a clip from Rick and Morty in the paper, which somebody dropped from my Substack, in which they're trying to fight this like superintelligence, and Rick is like, okay, we just gotta be extremely random, right? And so this agent, which would have been sort of reinforced by humans, may both learn to satisfy human feedback, but also as it plans or as it tries to engage in other activities, may eschew the techniques of rationality to make its decision, because it sees through games and through these sort of sandbox environments that those are very understandable by the human agents who are raiding it. So essentially what I'm saying is it may power seek, but the power deployment and the current frameworks we have for thinking about it are very narrow in our understanding of how power may be deployed.
Yeah, I suppose. So is the point you're trying to make somewhat like we can't fully predict how it would seek power? because these agents are sufficiently different from us. And
I
so we should.
That is correct. I think the only proper philosophical stance we can adopt towards these agents, knowing what we know, is Humean sort of absence of knowledge, right? We should not try to predict in any shape, way, or form, because what we end up doing are sort of psychological projections. And so I lean towards more sort of the human skepticism, and you know, that to me seems more philosophically sound as a position than any other one, which, as I hope that I've done in this talk, sort of aptly rebuted, because there is no real grounding in some of these claims.
I have lots of other questions and counters, but I'll let the opportunity for others.
I know this is
to
a very
talk,
controversial.
because there's
I'm
quite a
happy
lot
to
of
let you
hand
do this
raised.
talk. I know this is a little spicy.
Yeah, I'll talk in a second then.
I think Bob had their hand up next.
Yes, so I think one straightforward counterexample for this instrumental convergence would be a machine whose primary goal is to commit suicide. Like obviously they wouldn't pursue self-preservation. So I think the broader point is not that this is like an iron law, but more of a tendency within utility maximizers. Now, we might not make utility maximizers. I would prefer it if we didn't. But I think that's kind of the point. And these other attributes that you've pointed out, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, creativity, those are good points, but they also kind of contain some of the other sub-goals that Bostrom, outlines. So for example, to gain more self-awareness, you also need to logically have self-preservation, right? You need to stay alive to gain more self-awareness over time. So I was wondering if you think these other attributes that are outlined, like self-awareness, emotional intelligence, are also sub-goals that you think are plausible, or if you think that these might also not happen, in which case the sub-goals that are logically entailed by creativity, emotional intelligence, such as self-preservation, might also not happen.
Very, very good question. I think the critique that I'm trying to drive towards the thesis is more foundational. So when you say things like that creativity would logically be driven by self-preservation, or etc., what I'm trying to say here is specifically that the of cause and effects, right? When I mentioned Hume, this is what I'm saying. We may not understand the connection between a specific action and its effect in a specific scenario. And so I am trying to bring some contestation to the idea that we have to follow a logical framework to understand that because they want to do this, they will do that. This is a very human A to B inference, right? This is a logical system that we've developed. I mentioned, of course, Enlightenment thinking. I mentioned Edmund Burke from 1790. These are human modes of thinking, which, when we are faced in, as Bostrom says himself, an alien superintelligence may not actually apply, right? I'm using the same thing he's mentioned, right? The fact that it's alien, to say that, why are we then using this very, humanist, post-middle age sort of rational thought to identify how this thing was supposed to be multiple standard deviations of IQ above us to use? Well, the only thing that means, at least to me in my reading, is that we assume that this superintelligence is like us, when in fact it is alien, right? I'm not answering your question, I know, but the problem with the question is that it's still within the frame of logic, right? And we must eschew our frame of logic in order to come up with new theories or new possibilities from these systems if we truly believe them to be, as Bosham says, alien superintelligences.
Okay, I'm going to try to rephrase that to see if I understood you correctly. And to clarify, I'm not like a causal realist. I don't believe in causation as like a fundamental concept. So when I say, oh, it's whatever self-preservation that causes creativity, it could also be the other way around. We would have no way of knowing, assuming that causality even exists, whatever. But as I understand it, these examples you gave, such as emotional intelligence and creativity and whatever, they might also not apply to the AI.
Absolutely, right. I'm just trying to name things that are outside of, Bosham goes out of his way to define what he thinks intelligence is. And I take our modern considerations of intelligence, which are, considered by fields like psychology, philosophy, and neuroscience as things that exist outside within it. And he goes out of his way to define intelligence in this very narrow way. Let me see if I can find the quote here. Right. In the paper, Bosham defines intelligence specifically as instrumental rationality, right? So I'm just trying to say that there are other definitions which exist. And so
well, instrumental rationality wasn't invented by Bostrom. It's a pretty old term.
Yeah. I'm just saying that's how he defines it. That's how he defines intelligence, right? That's all I'm saying. Whereas we may have a more varied and eclectic or broad definition of intelligence. And he could have chosen to include different aspects of the definition of intelligence in his paper, but chose to focus it specifically on instrumental rationality, which is only one segment of what intelligence could be. And my beef, I suppose, in this paper with instrumental rationality is that it presupposes that this alien superintelligence would follow a similar framework of thought.
Okay, thank you. I will let the others speak.
Thank you, Bob.
Joel?
All right, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for the speech again and or the show. Yes, I also agree with you that we definitely shouldn't be kind of like restricting our imagination to a single version of what the superintelligence could end up being. But in a certain sense, I'm not exactly sure, like, I think that the narratives and the discourse has moved on since Bostrom's superintelligence already. But as I see it, how it is still kind of like topical and a good read is that it outlines one version that we should be looking out for, that we should be careful about. And in that sense, I feel that the justification of this narrative lies more in the kind of version that, yes, we should try to figure out and like look forward to like what kind of different versions the superintelligence could manifest into. But we should also try to kind of like be wary. And this is a justification for the AI safety as like a general kind of ground that this is one of the versions that it might end up being. But yes, I definitely agree with the Humean kind of like idea that we cannot necessarily say what kind of superintelligence the alien superintelligence will end up being. So yeah, I think that we should kind of like that this is simply like a warning story that this is where we might end up. So let's try to figure out that what is then a safe way to kind of like make sure this won't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely see it as such. One of many potential scenarios. I think the only thing I would say is that it has taken a central position in sort of engendering new frameworks of thought around this. You know, things like the paperclip maximizer, I think we're all descendant of this specific thesis. And so this is why I wanted to go back to the foundations. And you're right that thought has evolved sort of greatly since then. But to tackle the foundational text, I think is very important to reconsider our assumptions, right?
Yeah.
As we think about this field and advance it.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll pass on to the next one because there seems to be quite a few hands up. So, but thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna just one second, I'm gonna close the heat.
Okay,
right.
I think Nikki is up.
So let me see. I'm next, I believe. So
Go ahead.
yeah, thanks for the talk. I agree to most what you said. I also agree there is, say, a disturbing smell of imperialism in Bostrom's work, also in the consequences he draws. Maybe in defense of Bostrom, he is a philosopher. It's the job of philosophers to start from premises and then end up being very confused about it and not liking where they ended up and then issuing warnings. I think I also agree with you that Bostrom can be blamed for not vigorously investigating the alternatives to rationalism and investigating other types of intelligence that might be more aligned and more useful. I agree also that, yeah, if we encounter an alien superintelligence, it might have very different ideas than what Bostrom thinks it would have. It might not be a rational goal utility maximizer at all. I'm not a philosopher, I'm an engineer. I do safety engineering. So I kind of disregard the question of, what will an alien superintelligence be like, or what could it be like? I'm more interested in, okay, what kind of intelligence do I want to build? What kind of AI do I want to build? Now, one thing Bostrom has kind of convinced me, and lots of other work has convinced me, okay, I don't want to build a superintelligence. I don't want to build a thing that is maximally good at, say, optimizing something or maximally smarter than we are. From a safety engineering standpoint, I don't see how I can make that thing safe. Okay, if it's just a chess robot, just playing chess, yeah, I can still make that safe. But if it's going to be, say, a more general economic or socio-economic actor, I don't know. I think Bostrom can be criticized for not departing from his rationalist ideas. I would apply the same criticism to most of machine learning research being done right now, and that means also most AI research being done now, because almost all AI research being done is machine learning research. Machine learning research, most of it still looks at maximizing reward functions or minimizing loss functions through learning. So they still got this kind of, it's not about balance. You could say cybernetics, which was an earlier idea of artificial intelligence, was always about balance. We are now really talking about minimizing something or maximizing something, and it's just okay. If you put a minus sign in front of it, you can turn a minimizer into a maximizer, and the other way around. I think fundamentally ideas of balance of intelligence that tries to create balance has been lost, has been under-investigated. If you look at, say, Stuart Russell's book, he has this different idea of what useful intelligence is like. He goes into a cooperative inverse reinforcement learning idea, where at least the AI tries to, well, help you achieve your goals instead of achieving its programmed in goal. I think Russell still, for me, thinks too little about balance. So I have some more hope, some more optimism about some parts of alignment research. We say, okay, we should stop treating this as zero-sum games. We should stop thinking of AI as technology which should be able to win zero-sum games and really go into cooperative games. And in the end, I see also human society as a cooperative game, where the idea is that we should all win. At least to some extent, we can bicker a bit about who will win most. if you then look, okay, how much of the, say, effort being put now in AI research is actually being put into configuring AIs or designing AIs which will play cooperative games with us? Well, not a lot. So I think here there's also a kind of an attractor to the kind of, well, a kind of a hole that research tends to fall into, where it tries to replicate imperialism and tries to replicate the idea about maximization or minimization. I think cooperation requires a different mindset. I think it's possible. I think also that if you use that mindset, you get a bit outside of this instrumental goals and out of automatic power-seeking behaviors. To conclude, because we've been talking for a while, I feel there's a huge solution space here. Concepts of intelligence, concepts of very smart machines, which have not been explored yet, are way underexplored. In that solution space of different concepts of what intelligence is about, I think there's much more safer AIs than are currently being contemplated. And I myself have been also pushing, trying to get people into this different part of the solution space where we look at other kinds of intelligence. Thanks.
Thank you, Koen. As you said, I think there are, different things that can exist in the intelligence space. One thing that you mentioned briefly, and I wish I could expand on a bit more, and that expansion will require some more research on my end as well, right? Is the alternative forms of intelligence which we've already encountered on this planet. One of the thought experiments that I was going through thinking about this is whether or not on a million-year basis, right? If the system is able to plan and predict, as Bostrom claims, whether or not on a million-year basis, other models outside of rationality may be the optimal ones. We are unable to see them because we're stuck in our, 75-year thinking frames, right? But if we're thinking generationally, civilizationally, right, 1,000, 1,000,000 years ahead, perhaps other modes of thinking become prevalent and evident. I don't know what that is, because I'm just a human with a 75-year time frame, right? I'm a simple mind, but there may be other options once you extend the horizon of what is possible to think of. And I think it sort of leads to your sort of cooperative potentials. Yeah, thank you very much for your comment. Nikki?
Yes. Don't believe we have met. So I'm the outlier here because my AI safety background goes back to February. I'm a filmmaker, so I just researched everything. But that might be a disadvantage, but that might also be an advantage because I look at the whole problem in a from an outside view. So in my understanding, all the I think when Bostrom back then wrote it, and I didn't read it, there were only maximizers, probably. There were no the satisficers idea, and everything was not there. And I think that it's not like if there's a superintelligence that has like a huge amount of compute and could simulate all kinds of different world states in which it wants to maximize some goal it has set for itself. I think if it has like 1 billion simulations, probably the ones where it is alive, has more power, and all these instrumental convergent goals are fulfilled, would be the ones that look more promising to it than the others. So I think if it's a maximizer, I don't know if that's not really the default outcome. I agree with you that if it's super intelligent, then we don't know how it will want to achieve these or what way it will go to achieve these. So indeed, being irrational or being random in presenting itself to us might be a good strategy that we cannot see. But I think the end goal would still be a state where itself would maximize for something, because the of course, we're talking about an alien superintelligence, but it's not alien that it's landed here and we have absolutely no idea how it works. But it was the basic construction came from us. So we constructed it as a maximizer, and it will still be some kind of maximizer, even if it's super intelligent. All the other ways, maybe for satisfiers and all the other theories of how to build one, I agree with you. There might be, I think the convergent instrumental goals might not apply there, but at least in my layman or maybe enthusiast point of view, for the maximizer, they still apply.
That's very interesting. I mean, one thing that I would sort of push back on is I think we still consider the notion of maximizer as being somewhat on a short time frame. So on a short time frame, the maximizer behaves in ways which are legible to humans because it seeks to achieve its goal sort of right away. Now, if it is super intelligent and is trying to, and I'm sorry for playing the same game that I think the rationalists play, which is like you try to push it to an extreme to get to this like further conclusion. I'm sort of guilty of that at this point. But if the maximizer is thinking to maximize on a 1,000-year or million-year basis, it may become unclear whether or not the decisions it takes right now lead to the maximization, at least in our short time frame, which is sort of what I'm getting at with this idea that we do not fully understand, and you know, that's why I'm staying like sort of human skepticism in this scenario. So I agree with you that if we build a maximizer, it will maximize, but the further question will we be able to identify its behaviors, its current behaviors as leading, of course, right, cause and effect, as leading to this maximization? If it's intelligent enough to think very long term, right, to self-preserve, then I do not believe that we will be able to do so because
yeah, absolutely. But then you are not like debating or questioning like the instrumental convergent goals, but just the methods that it will apply, and that we will not like understand the methods, but it will still be, there will be still some end goal, even if it's like 1,000,000 years away, and that would still be being alive. And or I mean, if it's really alien, it could maximize for just being in one place and looking at one thing. We don't know, but still, since we constructed it, I think I absolutely agree with you on everything you said about we don't know how it will materialize. But I don't think there will be a super alien intelligence that doesn't have these goals even in 1,000,000 years. It might be play docile or play dumb, play random for 5,000 years, and will be uninterpretable by us. But there probably is an end goal. Sorry.
Yeah, I hear you. There's a sense in which rationality, at least how we perceive it right now, has a factor of legibility, right? So when I talk about when we talk about closed systems like games and whatnot, we think of moves as being rational as they lead to specific outcomes. And I think what move 37 is interesting is that there may be creative, is what the word they use here, ways of acting that lead to, even in a short time frame, the desired outcome, which are unforeseen or seen as irrational by human beings, right? And of course, everything is sort of post factum. So after the fact, now it can be included within the books of Go or whatever, and that can become a part of the rational actions to take. But it is a very narrow frame of philosophical inquiry towards the field to just think about it as being purely rational. And the problem with rationality is that we must be able to read it as such, right? In the same way that we demand people around us to be rational. Like, I want to understand the things that you do. There is a sense in which we perceive rationality because we understand, or we think we understand, the causality between the action and the effect. I'm sort of pushing back, I think, more towards the foundational aspect of using rationality as the main mode of, I guess, behavior for the superintelligence.
Miguel, I think, has a question.
We can't seem to hear you, Miguel,
Yeah.
if you're speaking. Does anyone have a question while we wait?
Other questions? Yeah.
There's some stuff in the chat, which I can maybe read from Madhusudan. Humans themselves are not properly aware of their terminal goal, and they tend to converge their instrumental goals to things that are centered around their self as humans. This is general evolutionary way. For any kind of convergence, it will be around self. The goal is to make the further alien or artificial intelligence not just have a centered around their own self as machines, but also have humans as their center of convergence, if not equivalently and primarily, then at least secondarily. Where does your confidence come from that humans have a terminal goal? I can't find one myself in introspection. I can't see. That's sorry, Jobs answered. What is your confidence that humans have a terminal goal? I can't find one by myself through introspection. I can't see any other way to test such hypothesis other than by introspection. This is a very interesting question, right? I think one field of study that's interesting here is the field of classical and now modern economics. In classical economics, we considered agents to be sort of rational in their decisions. And Kahneman, of course, Nobel Prize winning economist, has pushed us to think of agents in economic systems being a bit more irrational than we think that they are. And now to consider the idea of a terminal goal for humans is very interesting. I think it is a bit more of a maybe philosophical or spiritual question than it is more of sort of a technical question in this specific framework. So you may not be aware of that goal, but there's 5 or 6 religious books that I think have a specific idea as to like what that terminal goal is. Be godly, be good to thy neighbor, praise Allah, et cetera, et cetera. I think also that's from Josso says satisficers may seek power, just like Alex Turner argued. We cannot rule that out confidently enough. I'm missing a word here. I can't see. So we actively need to program the goal of not seeking too much power into the basic design. And I'd love to hear from people like Cohen and people who build these systems, how what kind of modes or safeguards we can implement to the systems that we prevent power seeking. Cohen, if you want to speak about this, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I guess we got 5 minutes as well. I'll try to be brief. So yeah, Job's comment about satisfiers seeking power is correct, unless you maybe program it in not for them to seek power. If you go to some more fundamental works by a guy called Steve Omohundro, and I might be pronouncing his name wrong, where he also talks about instrumental convergence. If you look at Steve's original paper, I think it's called The Basic AI Drives, Steve is somewhat optimistic at the end that we can program things to modify and channel these drives for self-preservation, for self-improvement, for utility maximization. I find Bostrom always much less optimistic about programming an AI to channel certain drives, to make certain drives overrule other drives. For example, the drive to help people, make that overrule the drive at self-preservation. I think partly that's because of rationalist thinking. I think partly also, like I said before, that's just not the kind of AI design that people usually talk about when they do machine learning research. I think comment also, speaking now as a more mathematician and from the mathematics of game theory point of view, it's definitely possible that any living being you can describe that mathematically as pursuing a goal, which is pursuing the goal would be to implement its fundamental nature. So it's kind of you could say, a circular argument, but you can then define that as its goal. Von Neumann has shown that you can also then create a mathematical function which expresses that goal, and that would then be either a function which will be maximized or minimized. That framework doesn't really help you to think about useful forms of intelligence. So a chicken, I can describe a chicken as a super intelligent entity which tries to achieve the goal of being like a chicken. And it's very, very good at it. There's nothing better at being a chicken than a chicken is. So is it then super intelligent in pursuing its goal to be like a chicken? Well, this just shows one of these paradoxes when you try to apply these forms of mathematics. And I think Bostrom's also stumbling into those. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. That was, yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. That was, I think, a very astute description here.
All right, we've pretty much hit the end of our time commitment.
Amazing. Well, I would like to thank all of you for attending this. Yes, Miguel, you can reach out to me on Twitter, being_on_line, through the Substack. I run a research studio called 131. I also teach at NYU if you guys are in New York. So yeah, I mean, this was so fun. I'm so happy to have been able to share this with you all. And thank you for the amazing questions. Joe, if you'd be kind enough to send me this recording, that'd be amazing. Thank you very much.
It's going to be posted in the Discord channel. I'll try to get it to you if that doesn't work.
Amazing.
But yeah, it'll be posted with the other recordings in the Visu Discord.
Amazing.
All right. Thank you, Rui, for giving the talk. And thank you, Joe, for taking notes and assisting.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Bye.
Thanks a lot all.
All right.